breathed a sigh of relief. Disaster averted. She was whole again. After unpacking the box and carefully laying out each precious item on the kitchen table, she retrieved the other 2 boxes from the back seat and went through the same routine. She beamed at the sight of the bounty spread over the table. 7 more tubes of color, a new studio light to get her through the winter, a dozen pre-stretched canvases, and her favorite brush conditioner that smelled like something close to sandalwood. It made the task of looking after her brushes almost soothing. Discovering it last year had been a treat. Satisfied with her unveiling of the goods, she made 5 trips to the room she used as her studio, shelving the paints she didn't need yet, and getting the new lamp set up at her current workstation. She played with the LED settings for a while, still dubious about the idea that she could get good color temperatures, but the settings seemed sufficient, nice even. Isabelle crossed her arms and stared at the unfinished painting, trying to decide if the daylight setting was pure enough. There weren't new technological advancements in the world of oil painting very often, so she'd be happy if she could get excited about this one. Still, she'd have to work under the light for a couple of hours and see how it felt. During the summer, she wouldn't need it much at all. This room was meant to be the great room of the cabin, and windows climbed up the 2-story wall to the peak of the roof. The windows faced south, and during the summer, she had good light here for nearly 12 hours of every day. But during the winter, there were only a few decent hours of sunlight, and that was assuming the sky was clear. As a matter of fact, she glanced out, hoping to spot an approaching break in the clouds, but it was solid white out there. A good time to try the lamp, then. It was almost 2, so she should force herself to grab lunch first, but then she'd have hours to work. Her thoughts were interrupted by the heavy slide of fur against her ankle. "Hey, Bear," she said to the cat, surprised by his affection. He was an ornery 20-pound stray who'd wandered into her cabin 3 years before, and he didn't cuddle often. He meowed loudly for attention, but when she leaned down to scratch his chin, he sidestepped and eyed her scornfully. "I suppose you just want food?" she asked. She'd run out of wet food yesterday, which was why— "The groceries!" she gasped, but her heart barely managed a quick leap before she calmed it down. The bags in the SUV were fine. It was cold enough that she could leave them overnight and not lose anything. Except bananas, maybe. Those weren't as hardy as people thought, not in the cold. If it were summer, though— yeah, she'd lost hundreds of dollars of food that way over the years. But this time, the only bag in danger was the one on her kitchen counter. She rushed to the kitchen and unpacked that bag, happy to find that, aside from that damp cantaloupe, everything else was perfect. She shoved a frozen meal into the microwave, opened a can of food for Bear, and went to haul in the rest of the bags. Half an hour later, she was organized, full of chicken piccata, and happily planted in front of her canvas, adding a glistening highlight to a long stretch of a man's triceps. Glancing from the canvas to a spread of photos hung on a board next to it, she nodded. Perfect. Her eyes swept down the triceps muscle to the hard knot of elbow beneath it. What a beautiful line. Her attention twitched for a moment, and Isabelle glared at the gleam of the light on wet paint. But then she shook off the random irritation and dipped her brush in white again. Just the tiniest drag of paint. Her hand jerked, nearly touching the canvas before she pulled back. "What the hell?" she snapped, as she finally registered that a sound had interrupted her. A loud sound. The staccato knock of some stranger come to screw up her workday. She wanted to ignore it. It definitely wasn't Jill, her neighbor and the only person who dropped by unannounced. Jill didn't knock like that. She rarely knocked at all because she knew Isabelle wouldn't hear it. But it could be one of Isabelle's other friends.